Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me. Welcome back to my channel. Today, if you haven't guessed it from the title, we are going through a massive book haul. Now, I've been doing book content for a little over 3 years now, and a big perk of that is that I will often get publisher mail, author mail, which is fantastic. But when I get a lot in a short amount of time, I can sometimes be delayed in sharing all these fantastic books with you. And this year has been exceptionally bad. But today I am finally taking the time to go through all of the books I've received since January. Now, not all of these have been gifted. I am guilty of a good book outlet sale. I also went to a huge used book sale back in May, and those gems are in here as well. Let's get into it. Okay, so if you've been following me for a little while, you know that my taste is really all over the place. I don't stick to one genre. I don't stick to one country, one language sometimes. I love anything from horror to literary to romance to fantasy to poetry. It's really all over the place. So let's just dive right in. Okay, so one thing about me is that I am an Octavia Butler fan. I absolutely love all of her work. I own all of her work, obsessed. And this is the first ever biography of hers. So I don't know how Susanna M. Morris got this permission, but she did. And I am so excited to learn more about this incredible woman. If you haven't read any of Octavia Butler's books yet, why? Speaking of authors I absolutely love, Bora Chen. If you watched my 2025 wrap up, you will have seen Cursed Bunny as my number 3 read of the year, I believe. This is the same author, Your Utopia. It is more short horror stories. From what I understand, this one is a little bit more on the sci-fi side of things. I'm really looking forward to it. Next, we have Holly Jolly Ever After. This is the sequel to Merry Little Meet Cute, which was my favorite romance of 2025. I just love these characters. We've got queer rep, we've got plus size rep, we've got sex worker positivity. It's all just good things. And it's Christmassy. Like, there's not much better than a cozy Christmas romance, in my opinion. Next, we have Skin and Bones by Renee Watson. Now, I'm going into this one a little bit blind, but I was totally convinced to buy it because it's poetry, and I do love a good poetry book. And it's about a woman who's getting married for the first time in her 40s. And apparently, this is just very raw, very vulnerable about what it's like being a woman in your 40s, a Black woman specifically, in a larger body. It doesn't take much to convince me to read beautiful prose, and I've glimpsed really quickly into some of these poems, and it's just phenomenal. I can't wait to experience the whole thing from beginning to end. Speaking of poetry, I was gifted Pitiful by Brandy Bird by Anansi Press. Heads up, if you are looking to diversify your bookshelf, Anansi Press is absolutely incredible. They rep a lot of diverse and Indigenous voices from Canada. I highly recommend you look them up. This is a book of poetry. Bird is an Indigiqueer, Métis, and Cree author. This focuses pretty heavily on their experience with eating disorders, so you definitely want to check the trigger warnings. I've heard it's quite raw and vulnerable, but also very beautiful and poignant. I'm not above judging a book by its cover, and that's exactly why I bought Just Our Luck by Denise Williams. Now, to be fair, since having bought it, I've heard it's actually quite good. Apparently, this woman wins big with a lottery ticket and loses it. He finds it, and then they fall in love. Sounds to me like a perfect, very sweet summer romance. Okay, get this. Peter Pan, but with the violence from Lord of the Flies. That's all I know about this book. But Aardvark definitely got me with it. I am part of their monthly subscription boxes, and I grabbed this back in, I want to say, February. It just looks really good. I haven't heard much about it. Let me know in the comments if you've read it. Okay, so since having finished the Roots of Chaos series, which I really need to stop talking about, I feel like that's all I talk about. I've been on a bit of a fantasy kick. However, I wanted to change things up and try to read a fantasy that is of a completely different lore, something not at all Western, something maybe Asian or North African, and that's how I came across Spice Road. This is a pretty classic tale about a young girl who has special powers. She can wield anything from bronze, I believe, or metal, girl, and she's from a world that has magical spices. Now her brother goes missing, and she needs to travel to other worlds to find him. This is the first book in, I think, 2 or 3. So I'm really looking forward to reading it. The concept of magical spices just sounded too cool. Okay, so things took a bit of a turn. Unfortunately, my mic is completely shot, but we continue because I've got a lot of books to get through, okay? Okay, so next up we have Wilderness by Angela Flournoy. Now this is actually up for the Pulitzer this year, so I bet it's real good. Now this follows 4 friends who are all Black women, I believe, and it follows them throughout a 20-year friendship. Now I love friendship stories in my literary fiction. I love an all-female cast, so I am very excited to read this book. Staying on theme with Pulitzer, we have Dominion. This was also nominated for the prize, and I think it was a favorite to win. Spoiler alert, it didn't. So from what I understand about this book, this follows a religious cult in the southern United States, and specifically 2 or 3 women who are part of this cult, and it's quite sinister. Apparently it packs quite a huge punch in just a short amount of time. These kinds of topics are very trendy right now. I've definitely watched some shows and documentaries that I've enjoyed on this topic, so I think it'll be good. Little Rot follows the underground sex work in Kuala Lumpur. Enough said. I'm a big fan of Akwaeke Emezi. They wrote Pet and Bitter, a YA duology that I really enjoyed. They're a fantastic writer. Sometimes a little bizarre, but they really like to push the boundaries, which I always appreciate in an author. Alexis Henderson wrote one of my favorite books from 2024, The Year of the Witching, and this is one of her dark academia novels. That's all I know about it, but for me, that's all I need to know. Henderson does a great job at writing female rage, female characters in general, and she always has a really kind of creepy undertone. It's not horror by any means, but the visuals that she's able to portray in her books always stick with me. I can still picture one scene from Year of the Witching in particular that is so visceral. Next up, another one of my favorite autobi authors, Emily Austin. She wrote Interesting Facts About Space, which was my personal favorite one of hers. She also recently published We Could Be Rats. This was her most recent book. A lot of her books follow the same narration style. They're very conversational. They all follow similar female main characters. She covers some pretty dark themes. There's, diet culture, eating disorders, suicidal thoughts, heartbreak, but also toxic relationships. But she does this in a way that's very funny. So if you haven't tried any of Austin's books yet, I highly recommend it. This one in particular follows a librarian, so I think this one might be extra special. Parade by Rachel Cusk. I know nothing about this book. I know nothing about the plot of this book. I have just been told by everyone and their mother that Rachel Cusk is one of the most influential literary fiction writers, and I have yet to read any of her books. Now, I found out a little too late that this is one of her most difficult books to read, like in terms of formatting and style. But it's too late now, so I'm gonna jump into the deep end and see what happens. Yuki and Sam are soulmates. They are destined to spend the rest of their lives together. They are supposed to love one another forever. But when a miracle drug is released, which can extend a human's life indefinitely, Sam chooses to live forever instead of loving Yuki forever. And the world they know is spun inside out. Not me almost shedding a tear already. Also, look at this cover. So I'm going to predict right now that this is going to be a 5-star read for me. Land of Milk and Honey by Pam Zong. I've only heard the best things about this book, and to be fair, I bought it blind, but I just took a look at the summary and it sounds so good. Okay, so it's set in a dystopian-esque world, and there's a smog that creates massive food shortages across the globe. And this one woman is able to work as a chef in a uber rich neighborhood up high in the mountains. And after years of living luxuriously and not wanting for anything. She is kind of faced with a decision, like a blue pill, red pill type situation, where she can continue to live in this ignorant bliss, or does she kind of open her eyes to the reality of what's happening to the rest of the world and to, you know, people she's known her whole life. For what it's worth, this just also sounds like such a good book club read. I just feel like this would lead to the most interesting conversations with people. In a mysterious town, hidden in our collective subconscious, there's a department store that sells dreams. Day and night, visitors, both human and animal, shuffle in to purchase their latest adventure. Each floor specializes in a specific type of dream. Childhood memories, food dreams, ice skating, dreams of stardom. Flying dreams are almost always sold out. Some seek dreams of loved ones who have died. Honestly, after reading Water Moon last year, I have been in my whimsy, Ghibli vibe, and when I heard about this book, I had to get it. This is one of the like 2 or 3 I bought brand new because I saw its sequel for like $5 at a used bookstore. So I grabbed this one first actually, and then bought this one. I can't wait to read this. I actually think this is also the perfect time of year to bring these out. I love the idea of reading these in spring and summer. Kill the Beast! Does that remind you of anything? Beauty and the Beast. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's described as Howl's Moving Castle, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, all-time favorite books, meets The Witcher. So that description alone just absolutely sold me. Next we have The Scarlet Alchemist. Now this is written by Kylie Lee Baker, who wrote Japanese Gothic, which I talked about in an earlier video. It is part of my May TBR. Now this follows a young woman in China who is the world's like greatest alchemist, and she has trained to be so, but she ends up finding herself in an impoverished area, and in order to survive and to help other people survive, she uses her powers to make food, which then summons evil powers. Sounds great. Magical short fiction by one of my auto-buy authors, Olivia Blake. She wrote Masters of Death, which was one of my favorite books from 2024. January's features modified fairy tales, contemporary heists, absurdist poetry, love, and at least one set of actual wedding vows. Escape the slow trudge of mortality by diving into these enchanting new worlds with a master of imagination. And that's exactly what Olivia Blake is. One of my most anticipated reads of the entire year, The Hunger We Pass Down. This was on the Canada Reads long list. If you saw my video about that, I was really disappointed to see that it didn't make the short list, but I digress. This covers the story of 5 generations of women, and we start out by seeing Alice, a single mother who is way over her head with responsibilities, but she wakes up one day and everything in her house is gone. I believe even her child has disappeared, and she ends up being visited by all the trauma her family went through over these past 5 generations, I think including her own as well. It sounds heavy, but it sounds absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to read it. This is about a zoo of magical creatures. The Phoenix Keeper. Can we take a look at how beautiful this is too? Oh, absolutely stunning. Apparently this is like the most cozy read. It follows a zookeeper who tends to all of these magical animals. Apparently it's just low stakes, feel good, and sometimes that's exactly what we need. Who doesn't love a little bit of spice now and then? We have Sweet Heat by Bolu Babalola. This is the sequel to Honey and Spice, which I read a while ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years. I didn't love that book. To me, it read a little young, and I always feel awkward reading a little young in a romance, but apparently I've heard that this one is grown, but with the same characters. So I think this will be a lot of fun for summer. Deadly Animals by Mary Tierney. I've heard this is really good. This kind of reminds me of Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This follows a 14-year-old girl who's into the macabre. She is a little dark, a little twisted, but she enjoys like studying animals who've passed away, roadkill, whatnot, and she ends up finding a corpse one evening and ends up being part of the investigation, and we follow her solving essentially this mystery of a bunch of missing teenagers from her town. Sounds really good, a little creepy, right up my alley. The moon has turned to cheese. Now humanity has to deal with it. For some, it's an opportunity. For others, it's a moment to question their faith in God, in science, in anything. This just sounded too bizarre to leave in my cart on Book Outlet. Some of my favorite books are the most absurd, ridiculous things, and that's exactly what this sounded like. If you read it, let me know. I don't know a single person who's read this book. I grabbed Goodbye Vitamin because I've been told to read Rachel Khong. This seems to be literary fiction in its purest form. It tells the story of a young woman who leaves quite a long relationship and goes back to live with her parents, but when she goes back, she realizes her parents really aren't doing well at all. So there's a lot of different kinds of grief that she's dealing with, and this book follows her journey navigating all of that. I love a book with a small cast that reads like theater, and that's exactly what Snap gives me. This follows 3 people who meet in an anger management class, and we learn about each of their journeys individually outside of this class, and then how they're all kind of woven together in one way or another. This is one of my favorite tropes in any media. I also love it in film, so I'm really looking forward to reading this one. Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. Now, to be fair, I've heard different things about this book. It did win the 2020 Booker Prize, but I'm not sure how well it's dated. We'll see. This follows a young Black woman who is a babysitter of a white child, and someone at a grocery store or something believes that she's kidnapped the child, and that's where things just kind of start spiraling. The mother gets involved somehow, and that's what I'm unsure of. Like, I don't know if there's like a savior complex going on. We'll see. I hope not, with it being the winner of the Booker Prize. Next we have Foe by Ian Reid, and I'll probably be reading this one soon because it did make the Canada Reads list this year. It made it to the top 5, which is pretty cool. This is about a couple who live a pretty quiet life on a farm, and out of the blue one day they get this strange visitor who tells the husband, listen, you've been summoned, you need to go to like space or something like that on this secret mission, but don't worry, we've already taken care of things, your wife is going to be taken care of. Like, that's all I know. I don't know what this like taken care of means. Is there someone there with her? Is she being observed? Sounds a little creepy. I've heard it's a little slow, but that the twist you do not see coming, and I love that in a book. Speaking of Canada Reads, a book that was on the long list this year, Slice of Water by P.P. Wong. This is a story of a revolutionary. It follows a man whose father goes missing under like a tyrannical rule, and we follow his journey in like the underground revolution. Speculative fiction, dystopian, which feels more and more real every day. Another gifted book, Inheritance. Let's take a moment for this cover. Absolutely gorgeous. This follows a woman whose father's passed away. Now she's a successful lawyer in New York who flies back to Alberta for her father's funeral. However, she then realizes that he's actually not there, and he is indeed back in North Korea, where her family is originally from. While she's back in Alberta, she ends up finding all these letters and journal entries from her father and his family, and just discovers a whole history of her family that she didn't know of before. I don't think I can say that I've read a North Korean or North Korean Canadian author before, so I'm really looking forward to it. Detective Auntie. Now, I grabbed this from a discount bin. I think I paid like $2 for it. I grabbed it because Jalaluddin is an author I've read a few times before, and I've always really liked her work. I've read her middle grade YA stuff, but then I've also read her adult halal romance, which I also really enjoyed. This is about a woman who loses her husband, I believe, and then like just a few months later her daughter calls her being like, hey, so I killed somebody. So then her and all of her sisters, so the aunties, kind of help her daughter like figure out what to do. Sounds really fun. Like I said, I like this author's pen, and I think it'll just be a good chuckle. Okay, we're down to our last 5. Let's go through them. First we have Brat by Gabriel Smith. This is part Gen Z dry humor and part gothic horror. It's a young man who I think loses his job or something and ends up going back to live with his parents, but as he's helping them kind of declutter the house to sell it, he comes across all these weird, creepy home tapes, and he sees all these like weird ass images that have no meaning whatsoever. If The Godfather were a fantasy book, Red City by Mary Lou. This follows 2 competing families who are in charge of the creation and distribution of a very popular drug in this very sketchy city that is created by, I'm assuming, oppressed magic alchemists. I've heard a lot of things about Florida, the state, in general. Good, bad, strange, dark, quirky, and that's pretty much what Laura Groff gives us in Florida, which is a collection of short stories covering all of the different quirks that Florida has, the type of people, the like smaller communities within the state, the politics, the cultures. I've heard that state is like a wild ride, so maybe this book will be one too. Together they embark on a journey of a lifetime across hundreds of miles. 3 angry women, a truck full of kidnapped bachelors, and Lefty, a last of his kind snail with one final shot at perpetuating his species. But their plans come to a screeching halt when Russia invades. Now, I initially grabbed Endling because it was nominated for the Booker Prize last year. However, after I read the summary, I realized I've never read a Ukrainian author before, so I'm very excited to add this one to my shelf. Finally, I left the weirdest to the end. I am so ecstatic to read this book, Tartufo. This is about a town in Italy that has gone completely off track. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and they've just elected for mayor a donkey. Yep, waffles in the morning. Donkey. Now, there's this truffle hunter who is one day out in the forest and comes across this like mound and realizes that it's a giant truffle growing from underground, and it's a magical truffle, Tartufo. They don't know if this truffle will destroy the entire village or if it will save the village. And that's what this story is. We're about to find out. I cannot wait. All right, folks, we made it. We made it through the microphone mishap. We made it through the evening lighting, and we made it through all of these books. Thank you for joining me. I think that ended up being about 38 books. Considering how many books I read and unhaul on a regular basis, I'm not too overwhelmed with this many books. I just need to find a place to put them. Which ones of these are now added to your TBR? Let me know in the comments. As always, like, share, subscribe. Everything is super helpful. I like it on here. I want to stay on here. Let's be friends. Until next time, happy reading and happy buying.